Have you ever had someone that you were very critical of come to you for reconciliation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And in fact, I like that. Megan Barry and I became friends. We did some very tough stories that led to her downfall. But I reached out afterwards, and we had, we're not buddy buddies as far as hanging out together, but we became friendly. We've had coffee quite a few times, before she entered the political campaign again. And I feel strongly that if anyone, any subject of my investigation wants to say, you know what, I messed up, I shouldn't have done that, I want to do better, then I'm going to give them that chance. I'm going to embrace them as a fellow human being. We've had a coffee or two talking about memoir writing. And so, in her case, I appreciate the fact that we were able to have that conversation about reconciliation. Now, if something comes up in her campaign where I find wrongdoing, watch out.
The mere mention of his name can strike fear in those with something to hide. Phil Williams has been on the story in Middle Tennessee for decades. First as a newspaper reporter, and then at 2 of Nashville's 4 TV stations. After a quarter century at Channel 5, he's probably the best-known local investigative reporter in the nation. And that doesn't come easy or quickly. Here's a little trip down memory lane with Phil. Memories some of the folks involved would rather forget. Like the time Phil found slot machines in the break room at a Davidson County government office. This is Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kalodimos.
Are these tokens?
Yeah.
So what do you win?
I think if you get 3 sevens, you get like $5.
Our search for answers quickly took a dramatic turn.
No, we need you out of the break room.
Why?
Because I said so.
And who are you?
Let's go, Phil.
Who are
I
you?
believe you already asked him his name.
Let's go.
Oh, don't
Let's go.
Don't get rough with me, sir.
Let's go.
This is public property.
Get out.
Please do not touch me. But John Ariolo was unapologetic. Were they playing for money?
Are you so uptight about St. Patrick's Day?
Were they playing for money?
What kind of problem do you have on any holiday?
Were they playing for money?
And obviously you have a problem.
Were they playing for money?
It's there that you just don't understand.
In 2004, remnant couple Joseph and Sonia Smith were arrested for the child abuse death of their 8-year-old son, Joseph.
Investigators say that meant his parents repeatedly locked him up in a small room with just his Bible.
Does remnant advocate locking children up for lengthy periods of time?
We don't advocate locking them up for any period of time.
Absolutely not.
I have a tape of a telephone call between you and Sonia Smith.
This is Sonia Smith in Atlanta.
Sonia!
I did exactly what Ted told me to do. Take everything out of this room. We got everything out of there and locked him in there from that Friday until Monday and only left him in the room with his Bible.
That tape has been made or tampered or whatever. I totally deny
That is absolutely
that
untrue.
has ever been said by anyone.
And that's a miracle. You've got a child that's going from just bizarre down to in control. So praise God.
John Oliver's HBO show Last Week Tonight frequently takes notice of our investigations. For example, House Speaker Cameron Sexton's claims that the Tennessee Three were trying to, quote, incite violence among anti-gun protesters.
There's no doubt they were disruptive, but what's the evidence that they were trying to incite violence?
Well, they were trying to jazz people up when we had representatives.
Incite violence.
When we had representatives trying to go to the restroom, they got spit on.
Do you have any evidence that these 3 members were encouraging protesters to spit on members or troopers?
I mean, you can't prove that.
Oh, okay.
So you can't prove they were inciting violence, but in the interest of safety, you feel you have a responsibility to take their dangerous platform away from them.
Then there was Representative Scotty Campbell,
who himself abruptly resigned on Thursday, and I could tell you why he did that, but I'd rather let you watch as he sees his political career evaporate before his eyes.
As I understand, you admitted to sexually harassing this intern?
Give me just 5 seconds.
In fact, Scotty Campbell already knew we were investigating some serious allegations
Just a second.
about his relationship with at least one legislative intern, although he would soon divulge there was a second intern.
Which direction do I need to look for your camera?
Just look at me.
Wow. You know, I've seen a lot of politicians get caught out on this show. Some get angry, some run away. But in 10 seasons, I've never seen someone so thoroughly that their only response is, give me 5 seconds to quickly chug this, followed by, okay, where should I look while my career ends? Kudos to everyone involved there.
Also claimed to be...
Late night host Jimmy Kimmel highlighted our investigation of Ogles and his bogus academic credentials.
So he claims he made a mistake on his resume and then took a page from George Santos when a reporter tried to get him to talk about it.
How did you forget what your major was in college? Sir, don't you think voters deserve an explanation?
Sorry.
How are you? Congressman, we can stop right here and talk to you if you're willing to talk to us.
I like that strategy, try to pretend the reporter isn't there. Is someone talking?
But no investigation got as much traction in pop culture as our Policing for Profit investigation, which showed how drug agents were taking cash off of people just based on a suspicion that it was drug money.
¿Tiene mucho dinero en su truck y trailer?
Let's be clear. He just said, "Tenny mucho dinero in su trucky trailer," which sounds like an alien's first attempt to communicate with humans after crash landing in a Taco Bell.
How far do your roots go back in Tennessee?
Well, I was born in Tennessee. I was born in Murray County, to a family that did not have a lot of resources. We were dirt poor. We often did not know where our next meal was going to come from. I think that's a gift, though, because I can really relate to people who struggle, and I never forget my roots. In fact, I think there's a part of me that is always afraid of, poverty.
Yeah, you were dealt a lot of aces in your hand, that is, adverse childhood experiences. Yet you excelled. Weren't you valedictorian of your high school?
I was valedictorian of my high school, one of 4. Yeah, I think there was just a streak in me that was determined to find a better life, and I was blessed with people outside my family who were inspirations, so I
like who? Oh,
my high school journalism teacher, for one, Barbara Schneider, and she's no longer with us, but she was such a great inspiration. There were all sorts of teachers, and I think the biggest influences in my life were public school teachers, and that's why I have such a fondness for those who choose that career, because there were people there were teachers who taught me things that I was not learning at home. Mm-hmm. And so I carry with me a bit of all of those teachers throughout my career.
Was college easy, or did you get a scholarship? I mean, were the resources there?
No, college was a bit of a struggle because I grew up in a family, none of my immediate family had gone to college. I didn't really have great family supports. And so coming out of high school, I had a full scholarship to University of Alabama, but I didn't know myself. I didn't have a sense of direction. I didn't know what it would be like to go out on my own and to take care of myself. And so I actually spent 2 years working as a bank teller.
Oh my, really?
And actually have some wonderful stories from that time period, but it gave me a chance to grow up, a chance to figure out how to take care of myself. And then I had scholarships and loans to go to MTSU and sort of just found my own way.
And journalism from the get-go?
Actually, I started as a business major my first semester, but there was a part of me that was drawn to journalism because I'd done journalism in high school, but I was struggling, and so I went to the counseling office and to get some advice, and they had me do an aptitude test, and I was hoping it would say, "Yeah, go be a journalist," and it said, "No, go be an accountant." And I was like, oh, forget that. I'm just going to go be a journalist.
Boring.
Yeah, exactly.
No offense to the accountants out there, but.
But, as I look back, that accountant part of my brain serves me well as an investigative reporter. And so, maybe those two worlds are not quite as far apart as some people think.
I know you were in Florida at a publication before the Tennessean, but let's talk about when you got to the Tennessean. Who interviewed you? Who discovered you? Who mentored you?
Well, I actually never interviewed for the job at the Tennessean because I was working at Florida Today, had been covering the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger. I was burned out from that, had a job offer from the Palm Beach Post. And my executive editor, when I turned in my resignation, said, give me 24 hours. And the next day, he had a list of newspapers in the country that I could go to work for. Wow. And so I got the Tennessean job without ever having to interview for it.
And going home, were you a little nervous about going home?
No. At the time, I had married at a very young age, and my wife was eager to go back home. And plus, I had always wanted to work at the Tennessean. When I was in college, I applied for an internship at the Tennessean, thinking that would be my entree. Frank Ritter, legendary character at the Tennessean, called me at 10 o'clock at night to do the phone interview. And this was at the end of final exams, and I was just completely crashed. I don't remember what happened during that phone interview, but apparently it did not go very well. And so I did not get the internship at the Tennessean. I had interned at Florida Today for a couple of years, and so I had a job waiting for me.
You mentioned the Challenger explosion. I, of course, vividly remember where I was here on the air when that happened. Were you present at the launch?
I should have been, but if you'll remember, because of weather, the launch had been scrubbed a couple of times. I had been at the Space Center for those launches, attempted launches. Because I had had so many early mornings, my editor gave me a break. And so I actually was driving to work, and I saw the explosion in the mirror of my car. And then it quickly became an investigative project because I was assigned to the Challenger investigation itself. And so I was in the Kennedy Space Center newsroom sitting right next to William J. Broad, the science correspondent for the New York Times, and getting my butt kicked almost every day, and always trying to figure out, okay, how did he get that story?
Right.
There was one day that I had a lead about the search and recovery efforts, and I went up to the Coast Guard and because they had public information officers from all the various branches there in the Kennedy Space Center newsroom, and I asked about this lead that I had. Didn't get the story I was looking for. The next day, I picked up a competing newspaper, and they had the story that I'd been pursuing.
There's nothing worse.
But then I went back to the PIO for the Coast Guard. I was like, dude, what happened? I asked you about this yesterday. And he said, you didn't ask the right question. And he explained to me that they had something called response to query, RTQ, that they will only answer the question as it is specifically posed. And so if you don't ask the question precisely, then you don't get the answer you're looking for. That was a lesson that has really come to define my career.
That is quite a learning experience.
Yeah.
Wow. What was the best story while you were you left the Tennessean to go to Channel 2? What was the best story that you recall while you were at KRN?
Well, when I was there, my first year, we launched an investigation of the legislature. And that was sort of the reason that I had been hired, because WKRN had attempted to do a legislative investigation that was very flawed. And I criticized them in the pages of the Tennessean. And so the news director said, okay, if you know how to do it, hotshot, come do it for me. So I did that, and we had a big year-long investigation looking at the influence of special interests on Capitol Hill. Which is a story that we can always do.
It's universal and evergreen.
Back then, you had characters like Tom the Golden Goose Hensley, who was the liquor lobbyist, and was sort of like a Monopoly character with the watch hanging out of the vest of the suit he wore, and so it was a different time when the corruption was much more visible. And so that was a big project in my first year that we, won the Peabody for. I was all in.
It's Banner and Company. We'll be right back. Let's talk about the last couple of years. The stories have been epic, to say the least. But as you said, you don't always realize that from the start. You may think that something's a one-off or a two-off, and it ends up taking up half your year. How do you make that decision? How do you know when something's going to bear fruit?
You don't, and so you just to borrow the old phrase from a 12-step, one day at a time. It's one story at a time, and a good example is the investigation of Gabrielle Hansen, the controversial candidate for mayor in Franklin. I had no idea that would become such a huge story. It began simply enough with her using fake social media photos to claim that a group of women were her supporters, tracking down those women and doing that story, with no idea that it would end up with white supremacists coming to her defense, threats against me from those white supremacists. So you just never know. But my approach to investigative reporting is to do the story that's in front of me, and then keep looking for the new leads, the new angles.
Right. Franklin, Tennessee, perhaps does not have universal appeal, but some of the problems that were exposed in that investigation certainly do have nationwide importance and appeal. You were hearing from everyone, weren't you?
Absolutely. The story really got national attention. And I think there are two issues that are really in the forefront of my mind. Number one, you have this wave of extremism that's sweeping the country. And the fact that it could happen to such a hallmark-like town like Franklin, Tennessee, I think was shocking to people. I think there's also a larger issue with our own profession, that there are so many of these cases, these political races, that get no attention, that, where you have characters like George Santos slip through the process. And to be honest with you, had it not been for one persistent person down in Franklin calling me and saying, you've got to look at this woman, you've got to look at this woman, I probably would not have turned my attention to this race. And I think it's highly likely that she would have been elected.
True confession, and I regret it, but I don't, because you did an incredible job with the story. But someone actually called me about the previous arrest and criminal record, and I thought, oh, certainly. It's sometimes the tips or the leads sound so out there that if you don't look into them and do the shoe leather, you miss out.
Right. And who knows, we may be talking about the same person, because the first tip to me was about the criminal case. And
Didn't it seem out there to you?
It seemed out there, but it seemed like it could be true, but because the records were sealed, it was not going to be an easy story to get to. And in fact, I sort of forced her hand on that by just telling her, okay, we're going to do a story. We need your reaction. And she put out her own video acknowledging it. And so that was a bit of chess playing on my part to get her to acknowledge it.
That thing seemed to be unraveling in real time. You were at a meeting or at a gathering almost every night where some new thing would be revealed. That's hard to do on deadline.
Yeah,
and get it right.
That's right. It used to be that investigative journalists, and you'll remember this from your days at the competition, we had a lot of luxury to spend a lot of time on stories. We don't have that luxury anymore. Number one, because of strained resources, but also there's just so much happening as sort of breaking investigative news that you have to move as quickly as you can.
Don't you think social media, in a way, though, has revealed stuff that we would have spent years trying to find previously? People's hidden activities or something like the photos you were talking about.
Right. And in fact, my first clue about those photos was from social media, people saying, wait a second, I recognize where that photo was taken. That was taken in Chicago. That was not taken in Franklin. So then I started using some tools I have to identify people in photos. And
yeah, how much you have got to be just spending untold hours trolling around people's social media, especially if they're potential subjects of stories.
Absolutely. My wife will tell you I struggle with work-life balance.
I bet.
Because I'm always, it's my work and my hobby. I'm always in pursuit of the next big story. I don't hunt big game, I hunt stories.
Do you worry at all with the economics of TV? Cuts are being made all over the country. God knows I know a lot about the person who might be the, quote, face of a franchise, but deemed too expensive or whatever. And very often they're the first to go, or at least some bean counters somewhere decide that the value just isn't there, the return on investment. Do you worry at all about, you're a very rare breed now in the local TV landscape. A lot of places do not have an investigator of your caliber and your, the degree of esteem you have. It's expensive.
It is expensive to do what we do. I mean, and there are certainly more risks associated with what we do than with general assignment reporting, for example. Yeah, I mean, is it in the back of my mind? Sure. But I also know that my current management is so bought into what I bring to the table. And I think I bring to the table something that very few people do. And I'm not that concerned right now.
Well, you got a heck of an award this year that no other local journalist has ever won. The accolades, the awards, the legit, applause of your peers, it always feels good, but what does it mean to you?
I've had that conversation with my wife because I go to these award ceremonies and I walk away thinking, well, I probably should feel a little more elated than I do, because to me, it's nice. It's nice to have that affirmation. It's nice to be able to look at the awards when times are tough. Yeah. But ultimately, I'm always focused on my next project.
Could anyone ever lure you away? I mean, if 60 Minutes said tomorrow, or Frontline, or maybe one of those top tier kind of outfits wanted Phil, would you do it?
I would never say never, but I'm quite content being a part of this community and remaining a part of this community for the rest of my working life.
Which is, you're not going to give us a hint how long You want to keep at it?
My wife and I have different opinions on this subject,
Right.
so the conversation continues, but nothing anytime soon.
Well, when you do hang it up, I'm wondering what that version of Phil will do. I mean, what's your hidden talent? Something you can do or you enjoy that no one knows? I'm asking you to reveal something that, I mean, do you cook? Do you paint? Are you a musician or a singer?
When you asked, do you cook, I could hear my wife laughing and
Hysterically.
hysterically. No, I don't cook. I love to garden. I love planting flowers in the spring. During COVID, I started the pursuit of the perfect suburban lawn. And I'm not very successful at it, but just going out and digging in the dirt is what I enjoy. I love to plant flowers. I love to tend the garden, weed and trim trees, trim bushes. It's just a kind of a way to kind of get away from it all. My neighborhood during the summer has a yard of the month.
Oh.
And I won yard of the month last year. So.
And that's probably more meaningful than some of the Peabodys on your wall.
Yes, it was quite the surprise, and I actually enjoyed it greatly.
This is Banner and Company, and my guest is investigative reporter Phil Williams. We'll be right back. As we speak today, you are on to another one that almost defies description. The assistant police chief of Millersville, of all places. Did you come across the guy, or did someone tip you to him?
I came across him from the Gabrielle Henson investigation.
Right, because he had to part with her security detail, correct?
Well, after the election, she put out a podcast about how wronged she had been. That she claimed in that podcast that my investigation of her was the alternative that the sinister forces developed instead of having her killed. And so, and so in that podcast, she started sharing some of her wild conspiracy theories. And the show linked to Sean Taylor's conspiracy videos to buttress her claims. And so that was like, okay, who is this guy? Come to find out, he's the assistant police chief in Millersville. And that's, so this came directly out of the Gabrielle Henson investigation.
How many stories have you done so far? And I know there's more to look at, and the temperature is rising. I'm talking about on you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe 4, 5 stories so far. We're still following leads. But just like with the Gabrielle Henson investigation, where we were dealing with white supremacists, here we're dealing with QAnon types who believe all sorts of wild conspiracy theories, and they're turning against me on their social media.
Phil, they seem to have, people who can do bad things connected to them. There's got to be a certain amount of fear.
I mean, am I concerned? Am I careful? Yeah. Do I let it get to me? No. And I think that comes from a sense of responsibility to our profession. Because if I let anyone intimidate me and get me to back up of a story, then that's going to become the norm. And so I don't have a choice but to just, to borrow the cliche, to turn into the wind, turn into the storm, and get through it. Because giving in is simply not an option.
You are very active on social media, though. Any thought to just letting them ramble on and not responding, engaging them? And, some people might say you're giving them a little bit too much oxygen if you go back and forth.
I'm selective. For example, as we sit here, I have not engaged with them for a couple of days. There's one person trying to bait me into engagement, and I'm just not taking the bait. Here's when I do engage. They were making some very specific allegations about me being in cahoots with a pedophile network. There was an allegation that perhaps I had murdered my late wife. And I don't want it out there that, okay, well, he didn't respond. Maybe there is something to it. Plus, I think when you take them on head on, it calls attention of the rest of the community to look at who you're dealing with here. These are the type of characters involved with this assistant police chief. Is this what you want for your community? And I can only do that by engaging directly and telling my viewers, telling the community what's going on behind the scenes. And so I think it's important for people, like we were talking earlier, this job isn't easy sometimes. And I think if we can, pull back the curtains and let people see the personal commitment that is required, then maybe people will have a better understanding of what we do and why we do it.
Do you think that you might be too active on social media? I'm not talking in response to stories, but I've seen you share some stuff that, maybe reflects a little bit of your own political philosophy.
And that perhaps could be true. My philosophy is to be a defender of truth, regardless of which political side it is.
So when you see an opportunity to come out on the side of truth, regardless if you're going to speak out.
Exactly. And, unfortunately, we are in a time when there are certain political figures who are telling more lies than others. And so that is perceived as being political bias, when in my mind, it's just I'm staking the side of truth.
Because for so long, those of us, who are journalists and those of us who are on the air have been told almost to be invisible in the public discourse, that no one should know. You shouldn't have opinions, or if you have them, they shouldn't be public. But you're talking about an opinion on truth or lies.
And I wouldn't say necessarily an opinion on truth.
Okay.
I think there is truth,
Mm-hmm.
and to stake out that we are in a critical point in our society, in our political life, where there is all sorts of disinformation. Take my own example with this Millersville investigation. There are people out there with platforms who are saying things that are just blatantly false. And I think it's going to take journalists like ourselves to stand up to that disinformation, to stand up to those lies, and to say, no, we are not going to treat this as normal. We are not going to say, okay, that's your opinion. We're going to take the side of truth, and we're going to defend truth.
It now appears that other elected officials are on this guy's side, and people refuse to request an apology for something that was just atrocious,
right, that
this man said publicly. That's a little scary.
It is, but the company that owns News Channel 5, EW Scripps, has a motto that I think is so appropriate: give light and the people will find their own way. I think that was true with Gabrielle Henson in Franklin. We gave light. We showed voters who she was, and the people figured their way out of that situation. I think that's true in Millersville. We're showing what's going on. And ultimately, it will be up to the voters in Millersville to decide if this is what they want for their community.
Question about some criticism you've had for your stories about the current sitting district attorney. There are folks that think Phil Williams is out to get Glenn Funk come hell or high.
I've heard that.
How do you respond to that?
Phil Williams is out to get to the truth, and that's all I've ever cared about. If someone doesn't like me, I'm okay with that. I have no problems with people not liking me. And if you look at the stories we've done about the gentleman who was on his payroll earning $75,000 a year, not doing any substantial amount of work, I'll let that story stand on its own. If you look at the story about the campaign or the employees in the DA's office who are working on the campaign without taking that time off, that story stands on its own. If you look at the story we've done about eavesdropping equipment, cameras equipped with microphones, where the TBI felt strongly enough about what they found to go to a judge, and the judge said, yes, you have probable cause to search, that story will stand on its own. It has nothing to do whether, I get this every time we have an investigation. Well, you just don't like so-and-so. No, the facts are what they are, and I am perfectly content with the people judging me by the stories.
Do you think it's important as a local journalist that you live in the community where you can see the results of your work? I mean, nationally, people sort of fly in, do a story, zip out, and they never see the landscape change as a result of what they've done. Is it more meaningful that you live here?
It is. And I'll tell you something that just happened to me a week or so ago. My wife and I were getting ready for a trip, and we were at a department store where she was looking for a dress. And this was in Franklin, where we had done the Gabrielle Henson investigation. And this lovely African-American woman approached me, and she started tearing up. And I was like, are you okay? And she cupped her mouth, and she's like, you are my voice. And I teared up, and I was like, can I hug you, please? And I honestly, something like that means more to me than any award. To see that, and you can see I'm tearing up right now.
Yeah.
That means more than any award to know that I'm making a difference in people's lives.
So you're one of the most feared people by those who may not be doing right, but you tear up and you hug people.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit of a softie.
Banner & Company is a production of the new Nashville Banner. Our producers are Steve Haruch and Andrea Tudhope. The original music is by Verlin Thompson. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. We do a little thing on our Banner & Company podcast here, Phil, where we have the final question is asked by a previous guest, and those are sitting in that fishbowl. So grab one randomly, give it some thought, and you never know what you're going to get.
I went for a small one thinking, okay, it's not going to be that bad. From Eden Wilkinson, What is your greatest inspiration? My greatest inspiration. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread it. What is your greatest aspiration? My greatest aspiration. I feel like I'm doing what I've aspired to do. So I think what I'm doing today is my greatest aspiration.
Not many people can say that.
No.
Good for you.